Hi, this is Dan here. I hope you're doing really well today. In this lesson, I'm going to give you 5 really useful bass guitar patterns that you can use in a load of different styles. I'm going to show you the pattern and then what chords you can use the pattern over. I'll show you 1 or 2 famous bass lines that contain that pattern, and then we'll do a bit of improvisation. We'll end up playing over that backing track that I just showed you there, which you can download for free by visiting the link below. So let's start off with the really simple one that I'm actually pretty sure you already know, and it's the octave pattern. It's a very simple, quite easy to overlook thing because it's just so easy. But if we play, let's do it on the 4th fret of the E string. That's a G sharp. And that's the pattern. If you're on the E or the A string, you play the note and then you just go 2 frets higher, 2 strings higher, and there you have it. I will often play that octave with my little finger, especially when I'm towards this end of the bass where the frets are further apart. And that's just because it keeps the wrist a little bit straighter rather than having a bend in there, which I would have with the 3rd finger. So that's the pattern. A really good bass part that I like is Cosmic Girl, the chorus to that, and it goes something like this. That kind of thing. So we're going G sharp to F sharp, frets 4 to 2 on the E string with that pattern. What I love is they're movable, so you can go to the B, 2nd fret of the A string, 2 frets higher to the C sharp, and that's the part. And octaves are being used a lot there. So I'm plucking with my index, and the longer middle finger is already there, ready to play the octave. I'm keeping them extremely short there by just coming off the note immediately after plucking it. And you can add ghost notes there as well to add a bit of funk to things. Have a listen to the originals. Another very famous octave bass line is My Sharona. So that first riff is just octaves on Gs. And I can't be playing a vintage Music Man Stingray as I am without another example using a great bass line from Bernard Edwards' We Are Family by Chic. So that's going from A, 5th fret, E string, to G, to D on the 5th fret of the A string. And he's using ghost notes as well. And I find there, if I'm on the D here, don't know if that's exactly what he's doing, but I'm doing 2 ghost notes on the D. I'm going middle index so that I can then get the middle to the octave. So when you're playing octaves, you might have to have a little think about what finger you start with because you have to jump across a string. So those are octaves and they're super useful. One more thing I'll show you actually with octaves, something that you can just improvise on your own, is just to take a key and to play octaves through that. I'm just going to do this at random. I'm going to take a G natural minor scale, which is this. And all those 6 notes on the E or the A strings, I can apply that octave pattern to. So let's do it. I'm going to go this speed, probably some sort of funk pop thing. At the end there, that was just a little bit of minor pentatonic, which will fit over that. But you can do that on the major scale as well. So take an octave pattern, move it through notes of a scale, try to make it musical like I'm doing there. You can use a drum loop or a metronome. I'm just not using any of that. I'm making something up just like that. Right, here's another pattern. This is a major pentatonic pattern that I love to use. I use this all the time. Quick bit of theory. Here's a D major scale. Take away the 4th and the 7th notes of that scale and you're left with 5 notes rather than 7 notes, and that is a major pentatonic. You may have learnt it in that way if you know this. There's another way I like to play it, which is this. There are your 5 notes, that's it. That's the octave if you want to add it in. Having those 3 notes on the same string allows you to do something like I just did there, where I played the D, the first note, and then the second note E with your 3rd finger, you can slide. Then immediately you hit the 7th fret, which is the note A on the D string, and there's that note there. That's a major 6th, by the way, that last one. It's used a lot in old school soul, R&B and Motown. But one example I like is Crazy Little Thing Called Love by Queen. And I think he's doing that pattern. I think he's doing that exact thing. So a slight shuffle swing to it. Dun, 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 dun. So exactly the same thing I just showed you. D, E, F sharp, and that's the A to B on fret 7 and 9 of the D string. Bit of a shift there. Then we go to the G and you do exactly the same pattern. There's that little bit there. You may know some bass lines that use this. It may trigger something that you've heard before, and that's good, because I think if you can link a pattern or a shape to a sound, that's where your ear starts to synchronize with your eyes and your fingers, and all of this comes together. Especially, things like that D to the major 6 to the 5. I've heard that so many times in soul bass lines especially. Right, let's move on to another incredibly important pattern, this one. You can use this over a dominant chord or a minor chord. So there isn't a third in this, and a third is generally what defines the quality of a chord, as in whether it's major or minor. Actually, that note there is a flat 7 or a minor 7, so that's why we probably couldn't use this over a major 7, which would be 1 fret higher. But again, this is quite old school, quite 60s. Taxman by the Beatles is a very good example. So that's D octaves, that first pattern I showed you. And then we've got this. That's a hammer-on from frets 5 to 7 of the D string. Now do know the notes, that's a G to an A. But it's also a perfect 4th to a perfect 5th, or just a 4th to a 5th. That's just the distance that that note is from the root, which is D in this case. And it's just a case of knowing your scales. 1, 2, 3, 4 gets you to a 4th, and 5 gets you to a 5th. And those notes are really common in bass playing. Got a hammer on there, and then we're going to that flat 7 there. Another very good example of this is Play That Funky Music by Wild Cherry. So it's just a low E, and then D, E, that's your flat 7 to octave. And then another hammer on between the 4 and 5. So in low E first, so we got this bit first. So return to the low E, and then it's a hammer on between frets 5 and 7 of the E string. And another one between frets 5 and 7 of the A string. If you use the same pattern that I gave you and then just shift it to the E on the 7th fret of the E string, you can do it there. And I can think of so many bass lines that use just that pattern. That's Think I'm in Love by Beck. I bet you can think of loads. So you can just get the pattern and put it on any root and just improvise. So again, I'm always thinking of, if I'm improvising, without a drummer, without a drum beat or a metronome, I'm thinking timing. So that's what I'm thinking in my head. That's splitting it up into semi-quavers or 16th notes. Move it around. So that's kind of a D to a C. And as I said, there's no other chord going on underneath this, so it's a little bit ambiguous. You can use this over dominant 7th chords or minor 7th chords. Here's another must-know pattern. It's a dominant 7th arpeggio. There's that bit in I Feel Good where it goes. That outlines the notes of a dominant 7th arpeggio, except that last note, just 2 frets above the octave, is the 9th, so it's a D9 chord really. But the other notes highlight it perfectly. This works very well in conjunction with the previous pattern I gave you. And this lesson is quite soul, R&B, Motown based, just because, I don't know, it just sort of morphed into that. But a D7 or a dominant 7th arpeggio, you can use it a lot in blues as well. And jazz. In fact, in a 2-5-1, that's the 5, the dominant 7th arpeggio. So that's a common one as well, must know it. And I'm going to leave you with this mega shape, which adds onto the dominant 7th arpeggio. And to highlight this one, I'll play the backing track and play some things along. This little section will be completely improvised. Players like Joe Dart use this all the time. And his influences, you know, Tommy Cogbill, Duck Dunn, James Jamerson, Rocco Prestia, Willie Weeks, all of these players use this a lot. So here's that dominant 7th. And what we're doing here is just adding notes into it. That's a minor third to a major third. You hear that a lot in soul playing. That's the same thing up the octave. Chromatic movement from the 3rd to the 5th. Down the octave. Very common. As is that chromatic movement from the flat 7 to the octave. Chromatic scale is just that, going up every single fret. And so when you do that, you're adding colour, you're adding notes not in the key, and it just adds a bit of tension and movement. It's really cool. So I'm thinking root here, and I'm just playing around with the pattern. Always know the pattern down the octave as well. So that was the flat 7 to octave. In this case, frets 5, 6 to 7. By the way, I know sometimes I go quite quickly in these lessons. A lot of people tell me that, but just press pause and just digest the information, and then or rewind, come back to it. I like to, when I'm in the flow, just keep going though. So down the octave, that would be this. So that's fret 5, 6, 7, and now 3, 4, 5 on the A string. Funking it up a bit there, and also adding the octave. Right, I'm going to press this backing track in, play a few things. I'm just going to use, well, that was the one thing I didn't say. Every single one of those patterns I've shown you so far actually does work together. Okay, so I'm going to use a bit of everything. Now, as I'm playing that, it's really obvious what I'm doing. There's that major pentatonic one, octaves, that major third chromatic up to the fifth one there. I didn't use a dominant seventh arpeggio. I'll do that now with some sort of cool rhythm on top. That sounds like an exercise if I do it like that. But if I go... Yeah, that was leaning very heavily on just the arpeggio with that cool little mini pattern. So, things to do. First of all, go to my website via that link. You can download the PDF. I'll put all those shapes there. Then you can download the backing track and get to work on this. First of all, you need to know these shapes in every single key. And what's brilliant about these movable shapes is that you can do just that. You know, that was just in D. But what if I wanted to do in the key of A? Well, there's an A, fifth fret of the E string. The exact same intervals and patterns exist. So what you do is you learn it in different places all over the neck. And then whatever hits you, if you're reading a chord chart, or if you're hearing that this is in some sort of music that you're working on, you can just call on this instantly. So you need to learn the shapes, and then you need to organize them into bass lines. That's where you just sit down. Well, first of all, you work out a lot of songs that have this in. You copy, you know, Paul McCartney, Willie Weeks, all these other players where I was giving you examples before. You copy them, and then you realize there's a connection between what they're playing and this sort of stuff. And that's where the light bulb moments go off, and you can make this your own. I hope you enjoyed that lesson. I do have a soul R&B Motown course with loads more stuff like this, so I'll put a link below to that if you're interested. Please can you like this video and subscribe to the channel, as that really helps it grow, and that would really help me out. Thanks very much. One last thing, if you did like that patterns based video, then you'll definitely like this one too. Thanks for watching. See you next time.